Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for being here today. I hope that you guys have learned as much as I have throughout the day. A lot of really exciting things happening. This is one of those conferences where the follow-up is going to be, kind of keeping that excitement going. So we hope that as you finish up today, you're leaving on a high, and that you pull that high all the way through into the follow-up engagement that we'll have about how we're going to push forward addressing the huge number of problems and issues that have been brought up throughout the sessions today. So thank you again for being here, and we're excited to really finish out the day with a very exciting talk. And so without further ado, I will introduce our closing keynote speaker, Dr. Sally Keller. She is an endowed distinguished professor in biocomplexity and director of the Social and Decision Analytics Division within the BioComplexity Institute and Initiative here at UVA. She is also professor of public health sciences here at UVA. She is a National Associate of National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, a Fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, an elected member of the International Statistics Institute, a fellow and a past president of the American Statistical Association, and has held numerous academic positions at several institutions, including Virginia Tech, University of Waterloo, Rice University, and Kansas State University. She's got a very long and impressive CV, and I'll let you guys kind of read more so we can let her get on to talking, but we are absolutely thrilled that she's joined us here at UVA. She is a fabulous contributor and active collaborator with the School of Data Science, and she really is a leading voice in creating the science of all data and advancing research across disciplines in statistics, data access, confidentiality, and data science for the benefit of society and really for social good, one of the major initiatives that we're looking to push forward in the School of Data Science. So please join me in giving a nice warm welcome to Dr. Sally Keller.
Thank you, Arlen. Thank you. Am I on? Can you hear me? Great. So thank you. It's a pleasure to wrap up the day with you all. And before I get right into my talk, let me just say a couple words about my parent organization, because it's very new to UVA, as you all know. So I'm part of the BioComplexity Institute. And how I like to talk about the Institute is that the scope of science that we take on as an institute ranges from the very theoretical, mathematical, bench biology, genomics, omics, all of these sorts of areas, and then tries to move through the behavioral levels and scales till you get to society's population and driving towards what we now call evidence-based policy. My group is on that evidence-based policy end of the spectrum of the research that we do. And we're also located in the Northern Capital Region in Roslyn, right below the Darden School. Or I should say they're located right above us. And we welcome you to come and stop to visit us if you're in that area. But we're strategically located there because it really helps anchor the research of the Institute and hopefully also some of the research of the Data Science School and of UVA in really driving data science towards policy, towards public good and social good applications. And so when you're in the heartbeat of the policy space and the world, you can't help but wake up every morning thinking about those kinds of problems. You just can't get away from them. So it really keeps us focused and helps bring other people along. So that's the Institute. Enough about that. So today, you spent a lot of time talking about data science. And so let me bring you back to kind of my favorite definition of data science. And data science starts with a problem. That's how this transdisciplinary field actually got its genesis. It was about this idea that we have these really major problems out there, and what we want to do is to bring data together in all different sorts of ways to help solve these problems. There's a consequence to this, and it's namely that if you don't have problems, if you're not focused and anchored in a problem, you're really not doing data science. And so this is a theme I'm going to motivate for you throughout my talk today. That data science is really about bringing disciplines together and bringing data together, all of the theory and methods that we have around that to solve problems. As such, it's a team sport. And I think that's what's on our data science mugs, right? It is definitely a team sport. This is my team. And what I'm going to talk to you about today really has come from the work of my team with a lot of others. And there's about a dozen feet missing from the team picture right now because we have grown. All right, so you've been talking about data science, you've been talking about the pillars of data science, you've been learning all sorts of new things. So I think it's just appropriate to have a quiz. Let's see how well you guys have done today. So here's the quiz. What came first? Data or computers? Raise your hand if you think it's data. Boy, have you guys been listening all day? Computers. Person who performs calculations or computations. The word data emerged after that. However, observation has been with us since the dawn of time. And that's the trick, right? But what's really nice about this definition and how it leads to data science is that data is in effect assumed to be a matter of direct observation. So if you're going to make a direct observation, what do you need? You need an observer, but what is that observer going to observe? How do they know what to observe? What do you need to help direct them on what to observe? You need a problem, thank you. So one person was listening today. Okay, so you need a problem or you need a question. And then the really beauty about this is if you're going to make a direct observation, you also are going to have to invoke measurement in some way. And today for data science, we heard about this in many of the sessions, a lot of measurement is about the repurposing of existing data, as opposed to the traditional ways that science has grown up using design data collection. We use both, but this is a new twist of the data science, is that frequently data scientists are not involved in the data collection or in the design of the data collection. So this is all bringing us back to the roots of what are data. Well, what I want to do today is to take you on my journey. And it's a 6-year journey. So I hope you're comfortable. And it starts with being asked to start a new research organization within the BioComplexity Institute. And shortly thereafter, the recruitment of my deputy, Stephanie Shipp, who I'd worked with before, to come on this journey with me to create this research group. Now, when we started, we didn't set out to create a data science research organization. We set out to create an organization that would help anchor the BioComplexity Institute in this evidence-based policy direction. And to be honest, until 2 years ago, I hadn't realized that what we had done was to create a data science research organization. I was invited to the Canadian Institute of Statistical Sciences to keynote their workshop on data science, and I was asked to talk about creating a data science organization. And I said, well, I'm happy to do that, but I'm not sure why you're asking me. And when I got into it, I realized that, oh my gosh, now I know why they're asking me, because it's what we've done. And the journey has some surprises. And I'm going to share those with you. And these are game-changing moments that really changed my thinking and changed the direction that we took to lead us to where we are today. The first one of these is a real doozy. When we started to stand up this organization, Stephanie and I had already been doing some research in the space of megacities. We were looking at the social impacts of the big data revolution that we were in and the role of information computing technologies in that space. And so that was what we were going to do. We were going to create a research organization that was really going to take on the social behavioral aspects of megacities and the impact that that has on life in those cities. Well, we thought, maybe it would be useful to actually not be quite so academic in our approach and go outside and maybe ask some city leaders, what are some of the questions that they actually think about and struggle with that data could actually be useful for? So we did just that. We walked outside the front door in Arlington County, that's the middle picture, and we realized that there was a dearth of researchers working with communities the size of Arlington, 220,000, and let alone driving towards rural America. Because at the time, particularly 6 years ago, the funding was going into New York, Chicago, LA, San Francisco, Barcelona, Singapore. But these other communities were just really being left behind. So that completely changed our direction at that point. And as I said, we walked outside. We had the opportunity to meet with the fire chief, the police chief, the chief technology officer, the only demographer, I was going to say the lead demographer, she's the only demographer in Arlington, some of the city planners, and we just started to share with them, data could really be a useful set of information to help you gain insight about life in the city and perhaps help you guide you in some of your policy and practice directions. And we gave a few examples sitting around the table. And the fire chief asked the pivotal question. We've gotten them all jazzed up about data, right? So he said, do you think it would be possible to recreate our fire EMS incidents end to end through our data systems? Because if you could, we would have a corpus of information to start to analyze, to understand a lot of issues about fire EMS processes, the distribution of services, efficiencies, it could be used for training. Do you think you could do that? So Stephanie and I looked at each other. We said, sure, we could do that. And then this is what we had. So this is a cartoon of the data systems. So in this particular example, we have multiple data systems. Calls come in to a CAD system. Units get dispatched. They're running around the city. They show up. Different things happen during the institute. Records, including medical records, get created, and then there's after reporting. There's other kinds of media and things that can come in. Well, none of these systems are connected one to another. There's no magic little ID number that takes you from one to the other. And we'd already said we could do this, so we had to figure out a way to grapple with all of these different data systems. So this was the moment that we realized that first of all, the data is not particularly big. There's just a lot of it, or a lot of different kinds of it. So that's the moment that we said, this is not about big data, this is about all data and how to bring all data to bear. The second lesson at this point was, well, maybe there was a lesson to not say yes so quickly, but we've never learned that lesson. But the second lesson was the fact that it's really important to get a grip on how data are born and what kind of data they are. Is it design data? Is it administrative data? Is it procedural data? Is it opportunity data? In this particular case, it was a combination of administrative data. These systems that I showed you are there to administer and to manage the incident as it unfolds. And then there was procedural data because there are rules in operations of what they have to do. So we got all this data, and what we did is we linked it. And we had to do a lot of linking in time and space because, again, we didn't just have little numbers of what the units were to put it all together. And this is just an animation of what the data looked like once we linked it together. And we just put this together almost for fun at one point, just to see, did we get this linked together right? And the graphic on the bottom is sort of showing you unit utilization. If it hits the orange bar, you've run out of fire engines. If it hits the blue, you've run out of medical units. And this picture so who gets excited about this picture in this room? Raise your hand if you get excited. A couple. Well, we had a room full of fire chiefs at one point, and we showed this picture, and it was, no pun intended, it was like spontaneous combustion when they got so excited because they could actually see what was happening with their unit utilization. Well, you can take this sort of data a bit further, even just in a very simple way. We were really quickly able to actually show them individual unit utilization, and as expected, medical units are out longer than fire units. And we never quite figured out the fire chiefs, and they're out in the green units. But this gives them some insight into what was going on. So, so that's all really good. But the more interesting thing for me at that particular time was that we took this data. It was hard to put it together. We put it together. We learned some things from it. And the thing we learned was it's an incredible surrogate for life in the city. Here's a little movie that's showing you the call volumes over time of day, day of week. And this is also showing you something about population volume throughout the city at those same times. So now we have an actual surrogate for other uses and other understanding of what's going on in the city. The other kind of aha with this particular moment was the fact that so many people that are focused on smart cities are focused on embedded sensors throughout the city to try to measure things, volumes of this and what's happening there. And they seem to have jumped right over the massive amounts of administrative data that already exists in the city that can tell them a lot about life in the city. So this was done off of administrative data, not through sensors or anything else like that. So that was another moment that we really realized, wow, there's power in trying to discover and use existing data that can exist in the community. Let me just take you through two quick examples of problems that we worked with the fire chief since he was our first convert in Arlington County. So the first example is, again, with that data that we linked together. And the question was, what's happening station by station with regard to response time to events? You want to respond within 4 minutes for your first unit and with 8 minutes with all your units to an incident according to national standards. So the first thing we did after we'd linked the data together, we just mapped distance versus time for all the stations. And when you look at these pictures, does anybody see any particular trend that makes one station different from another? Okay, I'm done tricking you. The answer is no. You don't really see it, or maybe you do. But if you now start to apply some data science techniques to this, in this particular case, we did a Bayesian generalized linear model with some spatial autocorrelation in it, controlling for different apparatus type, whether it's a life support unit or a fire engine or some other type of apparatus, and also sort of controlling for station. And as soon as you do that and you pull this together, this is the story. And so these are credible intervals, station by station. And what you'll notice is that all of the stations don't necessarily even hit the 4-minute mark, and that there is a difference between stations. And then, of course, we've done more analyses that can look at it by apparatus and different sorts of things. So the data science methods here were very helpful in disentangling what was going on. The second example is a little different. It doesn't involve the data that we linked together, but it was still with the fire department, and it's an example that actually a very similar version of it has just been done in Atlanta. Last week was National Fire Prevention Week. It's really important that homes have adequate number of smoke detectors. So what fire departments do typically during National Fire Prevention Week is that they try to go door to door throughout their cities where they can, and they come in and check your smoke detectors and determine if you have enough of them. If not, they install smoke detectors for you. Well, so Arlington, like other fire departments, has done this. And they would just sort of randomly go where they could. And they asked the question, is there any way to do this better? Next year, we have a limited amount of time. Can we direct our efforts in a more productive way? So what we did was we took the data that they had for where they went into a home, and they found that it did or did not need more smoke detectors. Then we mashed that up with all of the housing stock in Arlington County and the rental stock, and with American Community Survey, socioeconomic type of data. And again, applied our data science techniques to this to fit a model that would be trained on different parts of the data. And we were able to come up with predictions of either at the neighborhood level, the census block group level, or at the household level of whether or not those would be productive areas to try to go to maximize the amount of time, maximize getting these smoke detectors into homes. What was really exciting, because whenever you do these sort of predictive models and use different machine learning techniques, and you do your little precision recall on the data that you have, and you create uncertainty bands, and you just hope for the best. Well, what was really exciting is when we got the data back the next year, after we'd come up with lists of neighborhoods and addresses that they should visit, we got their data back and we ran it through and put it all together. We were within our uncertainty bands, and so we were quite excited about that it was a very nice example. But now this provides a mechanism by which they can optimize where they go throughout the city, trying to help the homes. Okay, so the next thing that happened on this journey is that the fire chief got a lot of confidence in us and decided he'd introduce us to some other departments and agencies. And we did that by way of a data discovery workshop with about 80 of the government leadership coming to this, sharing with them what data might be able to do with them, for them. And we asked them to sit together and talk about what keeps them up at night and how might we think about data assets to help understand that problem. And watching that made me realize that, oh my gosh, the librarian is talking to the fire chief, who's talking to human services, who's talking to the guys that do snow removal. And they understand each other because they're talking to each other through a new language, the language of data. All of a sudden, they're sharing data that they have that might be useful, that the other one didn't know about, and it was just magical. And it made us realize that if we can help build data insights around questions and problems that they have, it provides an opportunity to begin to break down the silos within the organization. We used to call this breaking down the data silos, and it's really breaking down the silos, period, of communication between organizations. The other thing that's really important is we realized, again, the incredible role that administrative data can play. So if you take away anything from this talk, it's go look at administrative data. At the national level, we've had the Evidence-Based Commission that finished its work probably about 18 months ago. We now have an evidence-based Policy Act that's been signed into law this year. Well, what is that about? For 25 years at the federal level, agencies have been trying to figure out how to share their administrative data to help inform the development of policy and evaluate programs. Ta-da! 25 years later, we have a law. We cannot wait that long at the local level. We have to start to help the same thing happen at the local level, and we cannot take 25 years for that to happen. It has to happen now so that we can really help these communities. Here's an example that crossed many departments, and again, it's in Arlington. And one of the things that we found is that agencies and departments within local communities, they frequently have the very same question. They have a huge desire to get their goods and services out to their residents. They want to know who's using their services, and even more importantly, who's not that should be, and how do they find these people. So in this particular example, the question came directly from the Parks and Recreation Department, who gives subsidies for kids and families to participate in their program. Population is growing in Arlington, subsidy use is going down, demographics don't seem to be shifting that much. So the question was, why aren't our services being used more? So to answer that question, again, we mashed up a lot of socioeconomic data with housing stock and other data that we could get across the different agencies. And we created what we called vulnerability indices. And these are composite measures by statistically integrating this data. And what we were looking for were, on the top picture, which you see are the housing locations of households that are taking advantage of subsidies. And then you're seeing the vulnerability index underneath that by census tract. And what we were looking for were, where are there different census tracts that do not seem to have the uptake on the subsidy use that you would expect, because that gives the Parks and Rec department the opportunity to go out and try to find out about those individuals. And then we took it a step further and we created some indices for the schools. And that's the bottom picture. The larger the circle, the more vulnerable the school, from the definition of what we were using for vulnerability, things like, the percent of children using free and reduced lunch, non-English speakers, a lot of other different measures like that going into that. And again, it gives them an opportunity of where to go target outreach to try to understand why this is happening. I will just put one caveat on this. One of the things we've also learned is that there's not a lot of understanding between local governments and other NGOs and activities within a community. So, maybe these subsidies aren't being picked up because the YMCA and other programs exist. We have an opportunity to bring those communities together as well. Okay, so the journey continues here. We don't just work with local communities. We actually work with other kinds of organizations, state government, federal government. With the Census Bureau, the question came in, is it possible to use local data to enhance some of the things that they collect on American Community Survey, or perhaps even replace it? Does local housing data and tax assessment data, is that actually adequate, such that we could be getting those statistics from that data as opposed to actually asking that on the American Community Survey? That's an example there. We also have worked with Procter & Gamble, a consumer goods company whose products touch 2/3 of the world's population every day. They were very interested in trying to understand, can some of the things that we're trying to do with data in a data science in a data science domain, could that help them think about how to synchronize their supply chain? Very specifically, is it possible to look at all of the business transactional data that is flowing because goods and services are flowing through that chain in such a way that that could actually be used to synchronize the chain? I mean, we literally went to Germany and walked the supply chain from the consumer, the material provider, manufacturing, the business units. And so rather than actually taking material flows through the chain, can we actually take their business transactional data and flow it through the chain? And we had some success there. Also, problems like with the Army. What if you have access to the massive amount of administrative data that exists on the warfighter and the families and communities that serve them? If you had access to that data, could you repurpose it in ways to actually understand performance? Because if you could, you'd have a constant measure of performance. Can you mash it up with other data, such as economic data and other types of information, to understand how the economy or the locality might affect all of that? So we started working these different problems in these different domains. And one of the things about data science is that because it's problem-driven, it starts at the point of translation as a translational science. And the fundamental research that underlies data science falls out of all these problems. And this is what fell out of these very different problem domains. And we literally asked the teams to draw their process. And we came together, and in these different problem domains, out fell what we now call our data science framework. Now, if you look at this, it has the pillars and more. One of the things in the framework is we always keep the problem definition and problem identification in our framework to keep us focused. One of the things that I think is unique about the framework that fell out here is the data discovery. And we have developed very rigorous ways to actually dream about data, but then actually come up with ways to discover data, create inventories and screening processes to neck it down to the data that might be useful for the problem. So that's I think, a very important exercise. Another unique piece in this particular framework that you don't usually see spelled out is fitness for use. You're continually making decisions about data choices, modeling choices. You know, we heard this morning in our first keynote a lot about this, about the choices and capturing those choices and the implications that those choices have around reproducibility, replicability, transparency. And this framework is one way that we gain transparency through careful documentation all the way through this framework. And Victoria has influenced this framework throughout the years. Another really important piece of the framework that, quite frankly, has only been on our picture for about 6 months, and that's ethics. And it was interesting because first we tried to figure out, well, where do we put it? Well, the answer is it has to touch every aspect of what we do in data science, and it has to become part of the conversation in the whole end-to-end process of a data science problem. So we're excited about this. It's really been working well, and it becomes a foundational piece of how we train in our research organization. Okay. All right. Not quite done. So, foundations of research fell out. Research problems that I kind of glossed over that you saw, the creation of composite indices and other sorts of things. How do you do that? That's sort of foundationally that's falling out. So we were really fat and happy doing our research and starting to write our papers. And then it's kind of a practice what you preach moment. And the question was, were we staying focused on community-based research, or had we drifted into doing research based in the community? So in at least one of the sessions I was in today, we heard about the vast number of research projects that Charlottesville gets asked to help with. If there's a natural disaster someplace, researchers flood, wanting to do their data collection, wanting to do all sorts of things. And the challenge is that we need to think about, are we really doing research based in the community, or are we actually working with the community on community-based research? And if we're going to do data science for the public good, we have to be focused on the community-based research. And in community-based research, again, it's sort of leveling the playing field of what data science can do for society by bringing it in service of the public good. And secondly, it's only going to happen if we actually have committed partnerships between academia, both public and land-grant universities, and communities. It has to be a partnership. The communities are the ones, the leadership and stakeholders, they're the ones who should be bringing forward the problems and issues and setting the research agendas. We can help execute those agendas, but it's their community, their problems. And then finally, what we really want in the end is we want to enable communities to become data-driven learning communities. That's what we really want. So to that end, we actually have a process that's evolved through our work. And we've all heard about collective impact and different ways to do collective impact. Well, this goes way beyond that. This takes what you might do in a collective impact setting and actually moves it forward into a data science process that's problem-driven. That it includes data discovery, the integration of the data, using those insights to measure and evaluate things, and then redirecting resources and decisions and things like that. But what's important in this process, and we call it community learning through data-driven discovery, is that data science and the data science framework anchors this process all along the way. And so we've successfully used this process with many communities now. And our goal, again, is for them to become independent in this. And it's a bit of a riff off of a healthcare learning system, that you really want to have this continuous learning process going on. So what you'll find is that there are some desires of what communities want to know. And this is where our research can start to focus on ways to help get at this, is that they want to locate and describe populations, they want to estimate things about the populations, and because I'm a statistician, I'll insist that variability gets estimated about that. Oh, by the way, we heard that data science is the hottest field of the 21st century. But I want to remind you that statistician is the sexiest occupation of the 21st century. So, just so you remember that. But anyway, so you want to estimate things, you want to estimate variability, you want to forecast future needs. That's really difficult during building predictive models and actually validating them in any way. And then you want to evaluate programs, policies, and operating procedures. But it's not so easy. Because you know what? We do a lot of that. We use different geographic units that data conveniently comes in, but life doesn't happen in census tracts. It's critical that we develop the methodologies to take data that are born in a particular way, in a census tract, in a block group, or however that geography is, or that time dimension is, and that we're able to realign the data and the estimates to geographies and to time points that matter for decision makers, matters in ways that are within their span of control. That's really critical. And so we've actually done a lot of work on that, and we've had the great, great luck that our other colleagues in the BioComplexity Institute have spent a couple decades building synthetic information technology methods and being able to move data and estimates around in different ways. So we've been able to leverage a lot of that research to take the data and build estimates and actually realign them to geographies that matter for decision makers. So how we do that, this is one example. This is an obesogenic vulnerability index. It has lots of different data in it. A lot of socioeconomic type of data that we actually are able to attach to the actual households, the full housing stock in the community. It has a lot of other information about a lot of place-based data, where there's access to food, health, parks, recreation, and things like that. And also other behavioral information coming from things like the behavioral surveys that the kids do in 6th, 8th, 10th, and 12th grade. And we're able to actually start to attach that down to the household level, or the housing unit level, I should say. And then we can begin to reaggregate this up into the geographies that really can matter to a decision maker. In this particular case, supervisor districts, those are the political districts within Fairfax and at the county level. And then school districts, which is always so really important, or if you want to stay with census tracts. But you can see now that you might be able to gain some insights if you're a decision maker into how you're doing relative to your counterparts and where programs might make a change. Okay. So, this one probably surprised me more than anything else on this journey, and it shouldn't have. So now you're working with communities, very local governments in medium to rural areas. You're giving them an appetite for what data can do for them and how data science can actually help them in how they're leading their organizations and how they're leading their governments. Then all of a sudden there's a job opening in the county. And they came to us. Actually, it was in Arlington who came to us first. They said, we have some IT positions open, but I'm not sure that's what we really need today. You've kind of shown us it would be valuable to have a data scientist. Can you help us write the ad? It's like, well, I can help you write the ad, but I'm not sure I can help you find the person. And it led us to understand that if we're giving these communities some independence and capacity for data-driven governance, that we also have to develop a workforce pipeline of data science savvy individuals who would be willing to take civic positions in these communities. And so we started asking some of the people in the local governments that we thought were pretty impressive. The demographer in particular, she's great. Why are you here? You could be working for any number of companies. What drew you here? What brings you here? And uniformly, the story that we heard was that they had had some really substantive experience in their local community, maybe with their local government, maybe they were an EMT, very early in their career. And that just really got them excited about working in a civic position to give back to their communities. So that's what led us to our Data Science for the Public Good program. And this particular program is a program where we bring in a cohort of young scholars each summer for 10 weeks. They're undergraduates and graduate students. They get teamed up in vertical integration, undergraduates, graduates, our postdocs, and our researchers. And we execute a collection of public good problems during the course of that 10 weeks. But in every one of these problems, there is a real sponsor, a local, state, or federal government colleague. And for the most part, this has been government as opposed to NGOs, although we're going to be expanding, where these students get that experience. And when we started this program in 2014, I can remember telling Stephanie, kind of doing the little calculation in my head, if 3% of these students actually take on a civic position, we will have won. And I'm really proud to say that 25% of our students coming through the program have taken positions in some civic capacity, and 20% of them are actually still in graduate school. So for the moment, our numbers look pretty good. So I think that this is what we need to do, is to get these experiential experiences out there where they're hand in hand in the community and they see the benefit that they can do. Okay, so this is the last one. And this is the one I want you to join me in, because I think we can create a national movement. And the national movement is very specifically to democratize data across the country, and with a particular focus on rural America. Because if we can do that, we can empower these communities to manage themselves. Now, we have started down this road, and so I think we're sparking a national effort. We have some funding from the U.S. Department of Agriculture to help Virginia Tech, Oregon State, Iowa State, and Virginia State University launch Data Science for the Public Good programs at their institutions this summer. And a key component to that launch, and it's been key to our work in this area, is a partnership with Cooperative Extension System that has professionals on the ground in every county in the country. And their job is to help translate the research of the university to practice, so they're a ready conduit for us to work with in these endeavors. Now, that's influenced by my land grant background. And the hope is here at UVA that there will be other partners like rural health or other kinds of partners for which we can engage in a similar way, who are embedded in communities already, and we can work through them and with them with these communities. So where are we today? Turns out we built a data science research organization. And the journey continues, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thanks a lot, Si. That was very inspirational. Wonderful questions.
I know I'm standing between you and drinks.
Yeah, really inspirational, as Phil said. You mentioned that there was a subsidy that wasn't being availed of. What was that?
So what happens is, in many of the programs, and in this case it was Parks and Recreation, that the Parks and Recreation offers, subsidies offers, to offset the cost of the kids or the families participating in different programs. That's the subsidy that they offer. And the thing that they couldn't figure out was that they would have subsidies left. Their subsidies, how much that they could put out there for subsidies would match at the sort of county level what the expectation was of who would qualify for the subsidy. But then then all the subsidies weren't getting used. And it was happening over a period of time where the population was also growing, and it still wasn't getting used. So the question was, where are the people that should be using this subsidy or should qualify for this subsidy but aren't using it? And they don't really have that information. They don't know that household by household. But what we were able to do is, at least through putting other data together, give them an indicator of what neighborhoods and what households would have a preponderance of people that should qualify for this. And then they could match, what percentage of that neighborhood was actually taking advantage of a subsidy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. I'm just wondering whether it changed, whether your findings led to.
Oh, the findings led to outreach. And it did two things. It led to outreach to those communities, and it also led to a dialogue between the Parks and Recreation offerings and other providers, other NGO providers in the county. Now, we don't have data back. We haven't looked at the data again to see, and that would be the wonderful next thing to do, to see what the impact was. There's another one down there.
All right, thank you for coming today, and thank you for the work you've done for these communities. I'm curious, does this sort of work scale up? I see they have lots of great opportunity for doing good for the public in this thing, as the name suggests. And I see a lot of organizations that are larger and can act nationally. Well, most of them have profit in mind, and not necessarily public good. So I'm curious if there's a way that something like this, or some way that this could scale up to help on that sort of a scale.
I hope so. I hope we're able to scale up, and I think to scale up, we need several things. First of all, we need more people engaged. We definitely need to be thinking through what is the infrastructure that needs to be available across our states to help support this type of activity, and who will take a role in helping to develop that. We already have networks to tap that exist, like cooperative extension, to help gain access, so that part is good. And then the third piece that I would say from an entrepreneurial perspective, I do think that there are services to be built that communities will actually be able to afford to subscribe to or to purchase. They cannot afford to pay for the research to build it, but I do believe not that different from how we've seen different services across the health space in rural America that provide services to a lot of health providers, and so that there's an economy of scale there, things like that. So I do believe that that's the case, and we welcome more people sitting with us to help figure this out.
Maybe somewhat related, but asking the question in a different way. So you seem to equate public good with local communities. And I would make the argument that public good is local communities, but also global communities. And you make this distinction between community-based research and research in the community. And again, I would make the case that they both have their own roles. And in terms of impact, in terms of number of people that may benefit from the research, the right research in the community that can be translated to a global population may have even more impact. So I'm not sure. I mean, I can see where you can make this choice, but are you arguing that this is the best choice, the only choice, or
I think I'm arguing to be aware of what you're doing, because you're right. There are obviously a lot of research that is based on populations and communities that we learn different things have great benefits. I don't want to imply that that's not important. It definitely is. But if you're really going to work with a community on their problems, then you need to stay focused on that. And communities can be a very broad concept. I've focused here on public good and gave a lot of examples for local geographic communities, and I think those are really important. But working with the Army is a community in our same kind of model. And so that the concept of community and the concept of public good, data science for the public good, is local, state, federal, global, definitely. So thank you for that question.
So I think we'll call it a day for today. Sally, thank you very much. We're so grateful
Thank you.
that you've joined us here at UVA and all the work you're doing. And I can testify that the students I saw this summer in the program were absolutely awesome. So it just remains for me to thank you all for being here. I think we'll all agree it's been a pretty full day and a very rewarding day. I'd like to thank Danielle DeAndrea, who's our awesome events planner. She didn't step out, did she? Did she? Where is she? Identify yourself. She stepped out. So thank her for all her efforts. Melissa Moody and actually Claudia went out to get her. So she's not here either now. Well, we'll wait for a second when they come back. But, thank you. And there's, if I say this, there won't be anyone. Everybody will rush out. So do thank these wonderful people on the way out. And on the way out, there's a drink, if you wish, out at the back there. So thanks, everyone, for being here. And onwards for the School of Data Science. Thank you.